On the cold morning of March 13, 1964, in the quiet neighborhood of Kew Gardens,
Queens, New York, a young woman named
Catherine Kitty Genovese was brutally attacked and murdered outside her apartment building. It wasn't just the horror of the crime that shocked the world, it was the story that followed. That 38 bystanders allegedly saw or heard parts of the
attack and did nothing to help.
This single event, magnified by media reports, debated by psychologists,
and remembered by historians, came to symbolize urban apathy, the failure of human compassion, and gave rise to the psychological term, the Bystander Effect. But how much of that story was true, and how much was shaped by myth, headlines, and the culture of the time? Today, we will peel back the layers of fact, fiction, and legacy to examine not only the murder of Kitty Genovese,
but the powerful impact it left on society, an impact still felt today.
Before the crime that made her name infamous, Kitty Genovese was a real person, with dreams, friends, and a life cut short at only 28 years old. Born in 1935 in Brooklyn, New York,
Kitty was the eldest of 5 children in an Italian-American family.
Her father, Vincent, and her mother, Rachel,
raised their children in a Catholic household. From her early years, Kitty was described as vibrant, outgoing, and independent. In school, she was known for her wit and confidence, but she also had a rebellious streak.
Kitty wasn't afraid to push against expectations,
something that would shape her adult life. After high school, she worked a variety of jobs, eventually finding success as a bar manager. By 1964, she lived in Kew Gardens, Queens, with her partner Mary and Zialonko. This detailed her same-sex relationship was something
not widely reported in 1964, an era when being openly gay carried significant stigma.
Many argue that Kitty's personal life was erased from the narrative in favor of making her a symbol of public apathy. But at her core, Kitty Genovese was a young woman in love, living her life and working hard, never knowing that fate would turn her into one of the most famous names in true crime history. It was just after 3 o'clock a.m. on March 13, 1964. Kitty Genovese had just finished her
late-night shift at the bar where she
worked and was driving home in her red Fiat. The streets of Queens were dark and quiet. Streetlights flickered. A few scattered windows glowed faintly, but for the most part, the neighborhood slept. As Kitty parked her car near her
apartment building and began walking
the short distance to her door,
a man named Winston Moseley stalked her from the shadows.
Moseley was a 29-year-old married man, a father of 2, and beneath his outwardly normal life, a violent predator. He later confessed to prowling that night specifically to find a woman to kill. As Kitty reached the entrance to her building, Moseley attacked.
He stabbed her twice in the back.
Kitty screamed,
"Oh my God, he stabbed me.
Help me. Please help me." Windows lit up, curtains parted. Several neighbors heard the screams, but Moseley fled briefly, retreating into the darkness. Kitty, injured, tried to make her way toward her apartment. Some witnesses later said they thought it was a domestic dispute, not a stranger attack. Minutes later, Moseley returned, finding Kitty weakened and struggling. He attacked her again, stabbing her multiple times. She collapsed in the doorway of her apartment building. For more than half an hour, the attack continued in stages. Finally, inside a stairwell,
Moseley delivered the fatal wounds and sexually assaulted her as she lay dying.
The nightmare was over, but what would live on was not just the brutality of Moseley's crime, but what the neighbors did or didn't do. In the days after the murder, the New York Times published a front-page article with a headline that shocked the nation. 37 who saw murder didn't call the police. Later retellings rounded that up to 38 witnesses. According to the article, dozens of people had watched Kitty Genovese's murder unfold, hearing her screams, seeing the attack, and choosing not to act. The story suggested that not a single person picked up the phone to call the police until it was too late. The image was devastating. A young woman murdered while 38 silent. New Yorkers ignored her pleas for help. It painted a portrait of a city and perhaps a modern world cold, selfish, and indifferent. But was that the truth? Decades later, journalists and historians revisited the case and discovered that the Times' story was deeply misleading. Yes, some neighbors heard the screams, but many didn't understand what was happening. Some thought it was a couple fighting. Others assumed it wasn't serious. At least one neighbor did call police, though the call was logged incorrectly. Another neighbor, Sophie Farrow, actually rushed to Kitty's side, cradling her in her arms as she lay dying, proving that not everyone was indifferent. The 38 bystanders narrative was, in many ways,
a product of sensational journalism. While apathy existed, it was not nearly as extreme as the story made it seem. Yet by then, the damage was done.
The myth had taken hold, and it changed the way people saw themselves and their society. Winston Moseley, Kitty's killer, was arrested just 6 days later.
Police caught him during a burglary, and soon he confessed not only to killing
Kitty but to 2 other murders and multiple rapes.
In court, Moseley showed little remorse. His motive was chillingly simple. I just wanted to kill a woman. He was sentenced to life in prison,
where he would spend more than 50 years until his death in 2016.
The Kitty Genovese case became the foundation for one of psychologists'
most famous theories,
the bystander effect. Psychologists John Darley and Bibb
Layton conducted experiments in the late 1960s,
showing that the more people are present during an emergency,
the less likely each individual is to act.
Why? Because of diffusion of responsibility, each person assumes someone else will help. The Kitty Genovese story, though exaggerated,
gave the world a term and a concept still taught in classrooms today. Beyond psychology, Kitty's murder had very real societal impacts. It helped inspire the creation of the 911 emergency call system, ensuring people could quickly reach help. It sparked debates about urban isolation and human compassion. It forced the media to reckon with how sensationalism can distort truth. And in recent decades, Kitty's personal story, her life, her identity, and her love with Mary Ann has been reclaimed, giving her dignity beyond just being a symbol of apathy. The murder of Kitty Genovese is not just the story of one woman's tragic death.
It is a story about truth and myth, about the power of media, about the psychology of human behavior, and about how one case can ripple across history. Kitty's name lives on not because she was forgotten in silence,
but because her story forced society to confront uncomfortable questions. Why do we sometimes fail to act? What responsibility do we bear towards strangers in need? And how can we prevent apathy from costing lives? In remembering Kitty Genovese, we don't just recall the woman who cried for help in Queens Inn, 1964. We remember the responsibility we all share to listen, to act, and to never stay silent in the face of suffering. Thank you for watching Crimes Through Time. If this story moved you,
please like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a new episode.
Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the 38 bystanders
myth damaged the truth? Or did it reveal something deeper about human nature?
I'll be reading every reply.
If this episode mattered to you,
share it with a friend who cares about history and human behavior. And a quick reminder, if you ever witness an emergency,
act. Call your local emergency number right away.
We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, stay curious,
stay safe,